Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Jutit. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. These are monitors that you see behind me. They are feeds coming into the CBS News Broadcast Center from all of our stations and affiliates around the country and all over the world. If it's happening out there, we're going to bring it to you right here in Studio 55. Let's begin. A trade war between the world's two biggest economies is ramping up as China vows to fight, quote, fight to the end after President Trump threatens to nearly double tariffs on Beijing. We're following the very latest and how the markets are responding. Plus, President Trump says the U.S. will hold direct talks with Iran this weekend regarding its nuclear program. But Tehran says otherwise, but we're learning about those negotiations. And the Supreme Court weighs in on the president's immigration policies and allows the administration to use a centuries-old wartime law to deport migrants. But there is a catch. We're going to break it down and explain what it all means. This is CBS News 24/7. But let's begin this day where we have for the last 2 days on Wall Street, where stocks are actually rebounding after a volatile trading session yesterday. You're taking a look at the Dow now, which is up about 3.5%. This hour, we're monitoring also Capitol Hill, where the president's trade representative is testifying before the Senate Finance Committee. He's expected to defend the White House's tariff policies. I want to bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady, who's joining me here in Studio 55. Good to see you, Kelly.
Good to see you.
You're here. We're here. We're living. As you said, she walked in this morning and said, we're alive. That's good. And now people are feeling perhaps a little better when they take a look at the market and see that it's sort of rallying. But this doesn't mean we've seen the bottom yet.
No, it doesn't. And in fact, a lot of investors I'm talking to and spoke to yesterday at the stock exchange after we spoke are saying, look, there's more to lose potentially, but there's a couple things that you're seeing happen today. One, there are talks that there might be deals to be had with countries. We heard the Treasury Secretary on CNBC earlier today saying that they're discussing things with 70 countries. Didn't share the list, but investors like to hear that. Investors like to hear deals. The second thing is this is a buying opportunity for those hedge funds, those more institutional investors that are playing the long game, because there are a lot of stocks and companies that you know are going to do well in the long run, like NVIDIA, that this is a good buying opportunity. And finally, I mean, you go back to the days that we have seen the S&P 500, a 2-day loss of over 10%. Happened last week. It's only happened 4 times in the history of the stock market. And you see over the 5 years after that, 100% return. So some people are looking at this and saying, good buying opportunity. But yes, we could have one little thing, as we saw yesterday, that comes out from the White House or one of our trading partners that sends us all the other way.
Or misinformation that has the market generating false hope. The thing that I'm sort of interested in, Kelly, is that people have rightly been watching the stock market over the last couple of days, but that doesn't really tell the story of the economy. The president is threatening more tariffs against China. The Chinese are saying they are going to fight to the end if the president does impose those tariffs. The worry and the concern, I think, is that no matter how things go, prices are going to go up in this country, and those jobs that the president keeps touting that are going to come back are not going to come back tomorrow. It's going to take years for companies to build up manufacturing in this country, even if they do so at all.
Yeah, that's right. This is something that will take years. It will take hundreds of billions of dollars. There are some industries where, there's excess capacity or factories that aren't being used, where things could happen overnight. But something that I'm hearing so much from businesses is that infrastructure just isn't there. That, okay, great, we want to bring manufacturing. I mean, I'm literally talking to people in the manufacturing space that are big fans of these tariffs, but they're saying the support and the infrastructure isn't there to make that happen overnight. The other thing that I would say is, you mentioned that the market is not the economy. We talk about this all the time. We haven't seen the data that would cause a sell-off like this. It's really just that traders are thinking about the what if and what could it mean if those prices go up.
So one of the things that I found really interesting, you mentioned the infrastructure. I've read reports that the United States doesn't generate enough electricity, for example, to ramp up manufacturing to the extent that China has. That's one thing. The other that I thought I hadn't considered, even though in the back of my mind I knew that this was true, was, for example, a lot of folks are saying, well, I'm just going to buy American. But for example, I play the guitar. A lot of American guitar companies have plants here in the United States. But what people don't realize is the parts that you build those guitars with, even if they are assembled here in the United States, those parts, those little pieces of machinery, the magnets that go into the pickups, those come from countries that we are now in a trade war with.
Yes, and I'll give you another example. I was at a fabric store right after I was on your show the other day, and I went to a garment manufacturing space, and she said, look, the fabric is still coming from Vietnam, from Indonesia and whatnot, even though we're actually assembling the garment here. So yes, that is very much that is very much true. I want to go back to the electricity point that you made, because I think that is so important.
It's really interesting.
One of the things that we need to make this tariff plan work and manufacturing bringing it here is energy. We don't have enough of it. And aluminum and steel specifically, we want to have that industry growing and bolster that industry here. I was listening to one CEO that said, in order to do that, in order to replace all the steel and aluminum that we get from other places, we would have to increase our production of electricity multiple fold. And so there isn't that piece that's going on in terms of the infrastructure point.
Yeah, it's a really interesting and tricky question that the president's going to have to answer. And even when he says, for example, we want Japanese to start buying, importing cars from the United States, headline, Japanese don't like American cars. There's a reason why they buy their cars and not ours. And so this is all sort of, I think it's interesting to watch what the market is doing, but there's a larger context here that sometimes isn't on display, and I'm glad that you're here to provide it for us. Thank you very much, Kelly. Always great to have you. And Kelly will be one of our Money Watch experts who will be here to answer all of your questions related to the tariffs. Just head to the CBS News Instagram page. Did you know that you're going to be doing this, Kelly? You're working overtime. You add your question into the comments, if it looks like a graphic on your screen, you can also scan this QR code that you see here. And Kelly and our other Money Watch expert, Jill Schlesinger, will join the Daily Report Wednesday to answer all of them. So that special airs at 6 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News 24/7. Okay, Chinese officials are calling the president's threats to raise tariffs on their nation even higher, quote, unilateral bullying. CBS News foreign correspondent Anna Korn has the very latest from Beijing.
As the trade war continues to escalate, China is refusing to back down and has vowed to fight to the end in response to threats of even further tariffs by the US president. On Monday, President Trump threatened an additional 50% tariffs on top of the now existing 54% on all Chinese exports to the US, unless China dropped its retaliatory tariffs on all US goods. China's announcement of 34% retaliatory tariffs was made last Friday, just before US markets opened, and sent global stock markets into a tailspin as the prospect of a negotiated deal suddenly appeared remote. Well, China's Commerce Ministry today described US actions as bullying and blackmail and said the country will resolutely take countermeasures to safeguard its own rights and interests. Well, China's stock market recovered slightly from Monday's painful sell-off that was made even worse by the fact it was closed for trading on Friday. Well, meanwhile, in Japan, the stock market was up more than 6% today, regaining most of the ground that it lost on Monday. Well, this was on the back of news that Japan and the US would soon negotiate a trade settlement. Japan, one of America's closest allies, was reportedly shocked by the US tariffs, targeting allies and adversaries alike. Back to you.
All right, Anna Korn for us. Thank you very much. Reporting from Hong Kong. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand, who's at the White House. Natalie, how is President Trump responding to China's reciprocal tariffs?
Vlad, good to be with you. Well, we just received a new post on social media, which essentially says he's waiting for a call from China. This was a new post that describes having a conversation with the acting president of South Korea to discuss trade and tariffs and other negotiations, as the White House has signaled that they are open to negotiations with all of the countries involved. But at the very end of this message, take a look. It says China also wants to make a deal badly, but they don't know how to get it started. We are waiting for their call. It will happen. So this is brand new information out of the White House from the president, as again, a number of administration officials, have said that they want to negotiate. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying on CNBC that up to 70 countries have approached the United States ahead of these new reciprocal tariffs taking effect officially tomorrow. As for China, this tit for tat in terms of threats, as that escalates, we now have a new message from the president. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But I do want to mention, Vlad, that I spoke a short time ago to a corn and hog farmer in Iowa. He's a fifth-generation farmer who lived through the previous trade war of 2018 during the first Trump administration. And his message, he says, is to negotiate and negotiate quickly because farmers are really worried about the potential for losing market share during a prolonged trade war. He says, China is a big customer for his products, corn and pork, and looking back to what happened several years ago, China will look elsewhere for those products if this trade war continues for a while.
According to the president, the Chinese don't know how to negotiate. So maybe, of course they do. And of course they know how to play this long game, as you know, Natalie. And the one thing that the Chinese have that the president and his allies in Congress don't are elections to worry about and midterms. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out with regards to China. Meanwhile, the president, as you know, is planning on holding direct talks with Iran over its nuclear program. He spoke about that during a meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel yesterday. Listen to this.
No, we're dealing with them directly, and maybe a deal is going to be made. That would be great. It would be really great for Iran. We are meeting very importantly on Saturday at almost the highest level, and we'll see how it works out.
All right, very importantly on Saturday at almost the highest level. So what is at stake at the almost highest level meeting, Natalie?
Yeah, well, the president in those comments said that Iran would be in great danger if these talks don't go well. And you heard him calling them direct talks. But Iran's foreign minister on social media called them indirect high-level talks. So there's a little confusion about how this is going to work. But he confirmed that they were set for Saturday in Oman. He went on to write on social media, "It is as much an opportunity as a test. The ball is in America's court." Now, an Iranian news agency is saying that the foreign minister will be leading Tehran's delegation and negotiate through a mediator, with U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, negotiating on behalf of the Trump administration. We've been trying to press the White House on more information about who will be involved, the goals here of these talks. We're still waiting for some answers.
All right. Confusion and conflicting messages coming from this White House, Natalie. Inconceivable. Thank you very much, as always. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. All right. The U.S. Supreme Court has weighed in on the controversial deportation of a man from Maryland to a prison in El Salvador. A judge gave the Trump administration until yesterday to bring him back, but the Chief Justice stayed that ruling. Moments ago, Attorney General Pam Bondi reacted to the decision and the idea that this man is an innocent victim. Listen.
To say that he was training to be an electrician does not legitimize him from being a violent gang member. And we will continue to fight for the safety of Americans and get these people out of our country to make America safe. Every victim of crime deserves to be safe. And these families who have lost loved ones to these, they are foreign adversaries, they are terrorists, and they are living among us no longer. And especially after that ruling yesterday, they better start self-deporting because we're coming after them.
I want to bring in CBS News Department of Justice reporter Jake Rosen. So Jake, the Attorney General there in those statements that she just made, can you remind our viewers, in the court documents, are there any indications that this gentleman is a gang member other than allegations made by witnesses that were not corroborated?
No, there are not, Vlad. And in these court filings about Mr. Kilmar Abrigo Garcia, the man at the question of yesterday's stay, in which Judge Roberts paused a deadline, which was midnight last night, to return him to the United States after a judge ordered him returned back in a Friday court hearing. There's no concrete or criminal evidence that he has ever been a member of MS-13. His family and his wife have told CBS News that he is not and has not ever been a gang member, in addition to his attorneys pointing out that the allegations in this alleged confidential informant note that he was the head of a MS-13 pocket in Long Island. He's never lived on Long Island. I think it's important to point that out. In this case, though, the deadline has been indefinitely paused as the Supreme Court considers this case. It's really one, Vlad, where there is no past precedent. There has never been the case of a man who's been deported as a result of an administrative error to a country, not the United States, while being technically paid. This government is being paid to detain him at least for the next year or so if nothing changes.
Yeah, and I know that the White House is claiming sort of a victory of sorts with these rulings from the Supreme Court. But Jake, help our viewers understand. The court also weighed in on these mass deportation flights yesterday. While it's allowing them to continue, there are certain conditions that the court has asked the government to consider.
Right, and in the case of Mr. Abrigo Garcia, I'll just add, there was no victory yet. The Supreme Court is still hearing that case. When what the White House has been claiming as a victory since last night, the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, sided with the Trump administration, saying that Judge James Boasberg's order here in D.C. that blocks the Trump administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport alleged gang members who are from Venezuela, part of that Tren de Aragua gang, those flights can continue. Those deportations can continue. The Trump administration has had a number of other ways to deport these people outside of using this 200-plus-year-old law. The Supreme Court said that any future challenges to people who are trying to block their deportation under this law must be held in the place where they're actually being detained. It cannot be in a place like Washington, D.C. In addition to, the Trump administration may no longer conduct these deportations in secret or at the last minute, like they did on March 15th, when there were 3 flights sent out at the last minute and a last-minute proclamation invoking all of this. There were no ways for people to reach their attorneys, and people's due process rights were violated. All 9 justices at the Supreme Court found that. So while the Trump administration is claiming a legal victory here, it really is in many ways a legal victory for the plaintiffs, even though they're going to have to refile cases elsewhere, likely in Texas. It is concrete proof right now from the Supreme Court and all the other courts that have adjudicated this case that the Trump administration broke people's rights before they were deported to that supermax prison.
Yeah, all right. Important information there from Jake Rosen. Thank you, Jake. We're following some breaking news out of the Dominican Republic, where a roof has collapsed at a nightclub early this morning, killing at least 18 people in Santo Domingo. More than 100 people are hurt. Rescue crews are searching for more potential survivors in the rubble. No word yet on what caused the collapse. Of course, we're going to continue to monitor these developments throughout the morning and bring them to you as we learn them. Meanwhile, devastating flooding is forcing several Kentucky cities to evacuate. We're going to go there live as residents assess the damage. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Right now, President Trump's chief trade negotiator is appearing before the Senate Finance Committee. He's expected to face tough questions from lawmakers amid the increasing uncertainty about reciprocal tariffs and the president's global trade war. Let's listen.
Made in the United States. And on April 2nd, the president declared the national emergency that we've discussed. And so the president has imposed a reciprocal tariff along with a global baseline tariff to achieve reciprocity with other countries and to drive the dangerous deficit down. And the president's strategy is already bearing fruit. Over the past few weeks, a planned layoff for an auto production shift in Tennessee has been suspended. Another automaker is hiring additional employees and expanding overtime to increase auto production in Indiana. Companies have announced $4 trillion in new investment in the United States. Nearly 50 countries have approached me personally to discuss the president's new policy and explore how to achieve reciprocity, and they've spoken with many members of the administration. Several of these countries, such as Argentina, Vietnam, India, and Israel.
All right, CBS News congressional reporter Torian Small is live on Capitol Hill for us. So senators, as you know, Torian, will have no doubt different opinions on what those tariffs mean and what we can expect going forward. So what are we expecting to hear from Jamieson Greer?
Yeah, one, we're expected to hear Grimm himself defend these sweeping tariffs and even calls for retaliatory tariffs in response to foreign nations decided to issue their own retaliatory tariffs against the United States. But ultimately, though, I think the biggest takeaway that we might expect or should expect coming out of this hearing is how Republicans will both defend Donald Trump's administration on these tariffs, but also coalesce around the idea of pulling back power within the legislative branch when it comes to authorizing these tariffs. There's been a groundswell of momentum around competing legislation both in the House and Senate that would essentially kneecap Donald Trump when it comes to these sweeping tariffs. We've seen a rush of support around Republicans pushing this, including from Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. On the House side, we had Congressman Don Bacon on Face the Nation say that he's starting to see preliminary support from folks within his conference also pushing that. So it's likely on top of the immense pushback and grilling that Democrats will do on this panel, undoubtedly, we're also expected to hear more potentially on this legislation.
The president's also talking about his hopes for one big, beautiful bill on government spending. How close are lawmakers actually to the point where they can agree on a big, beautiful bill?
We'll see. Speaker Johnson is emanating confidence, as he usually does when it comes to this, despite the fact that we've now had on the record at least 3 Republicans come out and say they just can't support the Senate bill because it doesn't have enough pay-fors to justify the immense amount of debt that this would add to the nation. Congressman Chip Roy of Texas is the leading antagonist of this bill, calling it a Jekyll and Hyde bill. The top Republican on the House Budget Committee also came out and said that this is both embarrassing and disappointing or unserious and disappointing in his words, that the Senate would go forward with this. Ultimately, though, it's that $5 trillion price tag that bill comes with, and just $4 billion in cuts that this bill that came out of the Senate would instruct. For House Republicans who tend to be more the fiscal hawks, that's just not enough, Vlad.
All right, Torian Small for us on the Hill. Torian, my friend, thank you. Let's get to some weather now. Deadly storms that slammed parts of the South and Midwest this week have killed at least 24 people. Some buildings are completely surrounded by water in the state of Kentucky, and some rivers have swelled to near record levels due to the torrential rain. Governor Andy Beshear just gave an update on the situation.
42 rescues, 272 evacuations by boat, 87 boats in use. Again, the biggest concern that we have right now are cars driving through water, are people going around barricades. I just saw a news story about another rescue that had to occur because someone drove around barricades. When you do that, you not only put your life in danger, you put the lives of everybody who's coming to rescue you in danger. We need people to wait this out. In many places, we've seen the rivers crest and the flooding will be going down. So please do not drive through either standing or running water. Turn around, don't drown.
CBS News correspondent Nicole Valdez is live from Frankfort, Kentucky, and joins me now. So, Nicole, can see the flooding behind you. How bad did it get, and what's the forecast going forward?
Hey, Vlad, well, as the governor mentioned, that flooding is starting to recede, but it's not happening fast enough for people who have truly lost everything. This is downtown Frankfort. Behind me, you'll notice some of the businesses there still, totally surrounded by water. We're only a few feet away from the Kentucky River. That is, of course, where all of this water came from as it crested Monday morning and sent, inches, if not feet, onto the road here, and it's still sitting here. I've got my boots in here. You'll notice at least a couple inches between where I can actually touch the ground, and it's sat here for about 24 hours since we've actually seen the last drop of rain fall. So that gives you an idea as to how long it could take to finally see these roads dry up and allow people to get back into their homes or their businesses to start that painful cleanup process. You mentioned the death toll. Of those 24, we know 5 have died here in Kentucky. That includes a young boy who was swept away in these floodwaters. Of course, a tragic situation, but a tough one to think about moving forward from, as so many Kentuckians have really dealt with almost a 1-2 punch with flooding just this year alone.
All right, Nicole Valdez reporting from Frankfort, Kentucky for us this morning. Stay safe out there, Nicole. Thank you. Mahmoud Khalil is expected to appear in court today as he fights the administration's efforts to deport him over his involvement in pro-Palestinian protests at Columbia University. What to expect from today's hearing? You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following this morning. The man accused of attempting to assassinate President Trump at his Florida golf course is asking to have an eyewitness account thrown out. Ryan Routh's lawyers claim the witness identified Routh as the shooter after being shown just one picture. They allege police were, quote, impermissibly suggestive when questioning the witness, and thus his testimony is inadmissible in court. Routh faces up to life in prison if convicted. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is calling to end the use of fluoride in public drinking water. He says he plans to tell the CDC to stop recommending it and will convene a task force to study the issue. The EPA is also looking into fluoride use. The agency says it will conduct a scientific evaluation to determine whether or not to restrict fluoride under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Last month, Utah became the first state to ban fluoride, even though experts argue it has been proven to be a safe way to control tooth decay. CBS News has obtained a Department of Homeland Security memo that warns employees to, quote, not use Signal to transmit classified information. The memo was sent out yesterday and says that Signal does not meet the department's encryption requirements. You'll remember National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and top White House officials used the app to discuss war plans in Yemen last month. Portions of the chat were published by The Atlantic after Waltz accidentally added its editor-in-chief to the group text. In the midst of trying to shrink the federal budget, the Trump administration and the government, rather, the Trump administration is unveiling its $1 trillion Pentagon budget. CBS News is learning at least 9 top military officials have been fired, including another top-ranking woman. Let's bring in CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata, who's joining me live from the Pentagon. Hi, Charlie. So who is this Navy Vice Admiral, Shoshana Chatfield, and why was she fired?
Well, she is or was one of the point people to NATO. So that is a sort of 2-for-1 because it also speaks to a sort of U.S. disengagement with NATO. But let me read the exact statement. This comes from Chief Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell. Secretary Hegseth has removed U.S. Navy Vice Admiral Shoshana Chatfield from her position as a U.S. representative to NATO's military committee due to a loss of confidence in her ability to lead. The Defense Department is grateful for her many years of service. That is where the statement ends. However, as you mentioned, this is the 9th individual, either a female or a person of color, who has been removed from one of these senior positions. Most notably, Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown was removed. The head of the Navy, Chief Naval Officer Lisa Franchetti, female, obviously, she was removed. In the past, Vice Admiral Shoshana Chatfield has been criticized for statements that she has made that were considered to be woke because they were sort of pro-diversity. So this is a trend, and we expect more, a sort of hit list of individuals who might be considered by Defense Secretary Hegseth, or to a larger degree by President Trump himself, as a sort of DEI hire or DEI promotion.
The other news, Charlie, out of the Pentagon is that they are looking to lay off thousands more individuals. What can you tell us about that?
Well, so Secretary Hegseth said there'd be between 50 to 60,000 civilian layoffs. And this was announced a few weeks ago, and it had to sort of been brought back a little bit because there are lawsuits involved, and there's also having to do with military readiness. But another kind of surprise announcement that came out of the blue yesterday is at a time of cutbacks, President Trump announced that there would be a budget of $1 trillion here at the Pentagon. And that is a significant rise from the $892 billion that's already in place. So the question might be asked, well, wait a minute, if these cuts are being made to the civilian staff, et cetera, Secretary Hegseth himself said he sort of celebrated the announcement on X, saying he appreciates this gesture from President Trump, and this money, taxpayer money in his words, will be spent on lethality. So there aren't any details as to how that budget is going to be delivered or executed. But I can tell you there are some sort of big ticket items on the way. Most importantly, the Trump administration, and Hegseth to a lesser degree, has said there will be investment in shipbuilding. Obviously, that's a very costly system to be put in place. So there will be some effort there. He also announced the other day a new fighter, the F-47. That is going to be rolled out. That's a $1 billion program just in itself. So this is where the money is going to be spent or procured, even at a time when they're trying to cut back.
Wow. All right. Charlie Daggett reporting from the Pentagon for us this morning. Thank you, Charlie. All right, turning back now to the escalating trade war. Global markets seem to have recovered from yesterday's sell-off, but the tension between China and the United States is growing. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio is following all of the international action from a trading floor in London this morning. Ramy, good to see you. So what is the mood of the traders where you are?
Yeah, Vlad, well, the mood feels to be hopeful after the past 3 days of red on the trading floor and a lot of opportunism here. It appears that investors see today, we say buy the dip opportunity, but really it's buy the plunge opportunity. U.S. markets pulling up right now after hemorrhaging something like $5 trillion in value since April 2nd. Looking right now at the Dow up by more than 3.5%, up 1,300 points. The S&P and the Nasdaq all near highs of the day, and following European and Asian shares higher. Across Europe, also near highs of the day. The FTSE 100 up by more than 3.5%. Germany's DAX and France CAC 40 all up as well in similar numbers. And this is off of the back of what happened also in Asia, basically green pretty much around the world. And that hopefulness I talked about, that was first lit by Japan. Check out how Asian shares closed. Japan's Nikkei closed up by more than 6%. The overarching reason there is that President Trump said that Tokyo is sending a negotiating team to the United States. So there's hope that if Japan can strike a deal, then other countries might be able to as well. China markets closed higher, but less so because Beijing, we know, is retaliating back and forth with Washington. And just in the past hour, Trump posted on Truth Social that South Korea is sending a delegation for talks too. But the analysis from people here at IG Capital, where I am, is that this risk-on mode may be short-lived. In financial parlance, we call it a dead cat bounce. And if Trump does not walk back his tariffs, no one is really expecting to. The markets may keep falling.
Yeah, very familiar with the dead cat bounce. And so what is the wider fallout then, Ramy, from those trade barriers and this escalating trade war with China?
Yeah, sure. Well, from the consumer point of view, for most of America, right, get ready to shell out more money or to hold off on buying things for a while until this all blows over, if it does, of course. Here, I talked to the chief markets analyst at IG Capital, Chris Beecham is his name, and he said that it'll not be felt just from the consumer point of view, but it'll have ripple effects across jobs and the economy. Take a listen.
Well, the risk is that because economies are mostly about confidence in the first instance, that if there's a concern that people will spend less, then those earnings of businesses go down, and businesses then invest less, they may cut back, they may start cutting jobs, and it's a sort of reinforcing feedback loop where you could then see economies tip into recession, people lose their jobs.
And he says IG Capital sees the U.S. now at a 40% risk of recession this year. Vlad, that's similar to other major financials.
Wow. All right. Ramy Inocencio reporting from London this morning. Thanks, Ramy. So, folks, if you have questions about those tariffs, we have answers. Just head to CBS News, the Instagram page there, and add your question in the comments on the post that looks like this graphic on your screen. You can also scan this QR code that you see right here. Our Money Watch experts, Jill Schlesinger and Kelly O'Grady, will join the Daily Report Wednesday to answer them. That special airs at 6 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News 24/7. Flood watch is in effect in Cincinnati. The heavy rain forced some people to find alternate forms of transportation. You can see this person was seen kayaking through a flooded parking garage. The National Weather Service says the warning is in effect for the city until Friday morning. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Hey, Grant.
Hey, good morning, Vlad. Look, Cincinnati right there on the Ohio River, and then you go just south into Kentucky, which is where you look at the entire state, and honestly, like half of it has either a flood warning or, is looking at receding conditions for some of those rivers. Let's pull up the map here. Let me show you what we're working with. And just from a radar perspective, no rain in the area across the midsection of the country. In fact, you've got snow moving into the northeast. We'll talk about that here in just a second, but I want to put on the current flood warnings that are in effect. Let's head back down into Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. Look at all of these outlines here. All of these polygons represent where we've got either river flooding or we have just land flooding from all of that torrential rainfall that came through last week. The flooding is going to continue. The rivers are beginning to crest in many places, but you see it's all running literally downriver. So places down to the Mississippi are going to continue to see the high waters because of all that water coming down from Kentucky and then flowing down into the Mississippi River. On top of that, not only is it just soaked down there, you've got freezing concerns. You've got several frost advisories or freeze warnings in effect as this colder air begins to move in from the north and west. Let me show you this because, look, we're heading into the middle of April. You want it to start warming up. In fact, it's the complete opposite. We've got snow in the northeast. You've got these freezing temperatures across the Midwest. Temperatures as we go into the next couple of days. Chicago down around 27 degrees this morning. We're up around 41 degrees this afternoon, down around freezing again tomorrow morning. It won't be until this weekend, into next week, until we start to see warming up here, and then back across the plain states, a lot of warmth. In fact, 80s across the midsection of the country. Fly back to you.
All right, Grant, thank you very much. Coming up, folks, there's a new encouraging research about the possible connection between popular weight loss drugs and curbing dementia. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. A court hearing today for the Columbia University student arrested by ICE over his alleged support for Hamas. It's been exactly 1 month since Mahmoud Khalil was arrested, and he is still yet to be charged with any crime. Let's bring in CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman, who joins me in the studio now to talk about it. So what are we expecting from the court date?
Vlad, this is an immigration court hearing, so it's down in Louisiana. We're expecting Mahmoud Khalil to be there. Most likely, this is just going to be about scheduling. But what's interesting is we recently heard Mahmoud Khalil's own words. He dictated an op-ed to his attorney that was published in the Columbia Spectator, and in it, he accused Columbia University and some of the students there of being complicit in what he calls his abduction. And he also compared the situation where there's been this crackdown on students to, he said it was oddly reminiscent of under Bashar al-Assad when he fled Syria and sought refuge in Lebanon.
Wow. So let's talk about the Supreme Court rulings yesterday, including the president's and the administration's use of this Wartime Act. What did they say?
So the Supreme Court has said that what these individuals have to do is pursue their own habeas cases, that D.C. was not the proper forum for this case. These plaintiffs who brought the case are confined in Texas. So they said you have to bring these cases where you are confined in Texas. And what's really significant here, Vlad, is that many of these people are already in this El Salvadoran prison. They potentially could have a remedy to file habeas petitions in Washington, D.C., but that may hinge on the decision in the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case. He's the one who was mistakenly put on one of those planes. The government admits it. They're saying they have no remedy to bring him back. But all of these cases are really intertwined. Although also when Judge Boasberg canceled today's hearing, there was supposed to be one for a preliminary injunction. In this case, he did give the plaintiffs an opportunity to brief whether they think there's still an avenue to pursue that preliminary injunction in his court.
What's interesting about the ruling is that the Supreme Court is suggesting that you just can't grab people off the street and deport them, right? At the very least, there is a minimum of due process that should be afforded, is what the court said.
It is. The only thing that the 9 justices agreed on is that there should be some form of judicial review, that there has to be notice and an allowance for some kind of challenge to the removals. But the dissent was really strong in this case, Vlad. It was written by Justice Sotomayor, joined by Jackson, Kagan, and Amy Coney Barrett. And she called this a dangerous precedent. She said the court is rewarding the government's behavior, that they're not even mentioning the danger to these individuals that were taken without this due process that they all agree should exist. So they're really saying that this could create a dangerous precedent. Also, especially the way the decision was made on what's called the shadow docket. So there was no briefing, just bare bones briefing. They made it the night before this preliminary injunction hearing. So there was not a full hearing of the merits of this case, and it's a very impactful and important decision.
Quickly, are you surprised that Amy Coney Barrett joined the liberal justices?
We've seen that she's been a bit of a swing conservative vote, so I'm not surprised that of the conservatives that she was the one to join.
Fascinating. Katrina Kaufman, thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, 2 new studies found that some popular weight loss drugs could help protect against dementia. Gimme, 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 gimme. CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder discussed the findings earlier on CBS Mornings.
They looked at 26 different clinical trials of these medications. These were not clinical trials specifically to look at dementia, but based on what they saw in those trials, there was a hint that these newer medications like Ozempic, like Mounjaro, may reduce the risk of dementia in people who are on those drugs. The other study looked at health records of tens of thousands of people who are on these medications. And again, there is evidence that people who are on these newer medications may have a lower risk of dementia. But it's also important to understand that these studies that were published were not specifically designed to look at that risk.
Dr. Gounder says more research is needed to make sure the drug itself is making the difference and not other factors. Got an update on that breaking news out of the Dominican Republic. Police now say the roof collapse at the nightclub has killed at least 27 people in Santo Domingo, and more than 100 people are hurt. Rescue crews are still searching for more potential survivors in the rubble. They are still trying to determine how many people were actually in that building. We're going to continue to monitor these developments and bring you updates throughout the morning. Coming back in just a few moments. Stick around. We'll be right back. NASA astronaut Johnny Kim arrived at the ISS a short time ago with 2 Russian cosmonauts. The Los Angeles natives and his crewmates arrived on a Soyuz booster rocket earlier. The trio are set to spend the next 8 months on the interstellar outpost conducting scientific investigations and technology demonstrations. They're joining a team of 8 from the U.S., Japan, and Russia who currently reside there. The Florida Gators men's basketball team are national champions for the first time since 2007. The Gators overcame a 12-point deficit in the second half to beat the Houston Cougars 65-63. Gators guard Will Richard joined CBS Mornings earlier and spoke about the comeback.
I think it just goes back to the trust we have in each other. I feel like we're a connected group, and I feel like as long as there's time left on the clock, we can give ourselves a good chance to win. So just trusting in each other and trying to make those plays to win the game.
Richard led the Gators last night with 18 points. The team is traveling back to Gainesville, where fans will welcome them home later this afternoon. Let's bring back CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the last look at the national forecast. Hey, Grant.
Hey, Vlad, look, it's a tale of 2 sides of the country, where on one side of the country, you've got cold conditions, you've got the ongoing flooding across the midsection of the country, and then you've got some really warm temperatures back to the west. Phoenix could very well be near 100 degrees in just a couple of days, low 90s for today. Meanwhile, you've got freeze concerns across the northeast as we've already gotten into the growing season. And then you've got snow. Snow moving through the northeast up towards New England today. And then another system quickly moves through the Midwest, bringing more snow to the upper Great Lakes into the northern tier states. I know it's the middle of April, but we're talking about accumulating snow, not just a couple of flurries, but up into northern Minnesota. They could see up to 5 inches of snow. The Detroit area could pick up an inch or 2 as that system moves through, and then up to the northeast with the system moving through today into tomorrow. You're talking about 6 to 8 inches of snow in some places upstate New York, northern Vermont, New Hampshire, and up into Maine. Again, it's going into the middle of April. We'll start to see a warm-up, though, but not until probably the end of the weekend into early next week. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Grant, thank you very much. See you tomorrow. That does it for me, folks. Stay right where you are after the break. Mugo Diwe is live from San Francisco with all the breaking news from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.